there, this is Welsh ASMR 82. Hey, how you doing? In today's video, we're going to look at Finland, and the aspect of history that I'm going to look at in Finland's history is the independence of Finland and how it has become a sovereign nation in modern times. So we're going to do a quick introduction on Finland, and I'm going to show you where it is on a map. And then we're going to learn about its occupation, firstly by the Swedish, secondly by the Soviet Union, and how it has eventually become an independent, sovereign nation. All whilst doing this in a whispered voice and talking in soft spoken as well, to help you relax and maybe even drop off to sleep. Okay, if you are Finnish and watching this, definitely drop a comment and say hi. Okay, so Finland. Finland in Finnish Suomi is officially the Republic of Finland. It is a Nordic country in Northern Europe. It shares land borders with Sweden to the northwest, Norway to the north, Russia to the east, with the Gulf of Bothnia to the west, and the Gulf of Finland across Estonia to the south. Finland covers an area of 338,000 square kilometres. That is 130,000 square miles. With a population of 5.6 million people, Helsinki is the capital and largest city, forming a larger metropolitan area with the neighbouring cities of Espoo, Kauniainen and Vantaa. The vast majority of the population are ethnic Finns. Finnish alongside Swedish are the official languages. Finland's climate varies from humid continental in the south to the boreal in the north. The land cover is primarily a boreal forest biome with more than 180,000 recorded lakes. Wow. And to put into context, within Europe it is very much on the northern point. Just there. Okay. Right. So, the first people inhabited Finland approximately 120,000 to 130,000 years ago. The area that is now Finland was settled in at the latest around 8,500 BC, during the Stone Age towards the end of the last glacial period. The artifacts the first settlers left behind present characteristics that are shared with those found in Estonia, Russia and Norway. The earliest people were hunter-gatherers using stone tools. Skipping forward, we basically come to the 12th and 13th century, which are a violent time in the northern Baltic Sea. The Livonian Crusade was ongoing, and the Finnish tribes, such as the Tavastians and the Karelians, were in frequent conflict with Novgorod and with each other. Also, during the 12th and 13th centuries, several crusades from the Catholic realms of the Baltic Sea area were made against the Finnish tribes. According to historical sources, Danes waged at least 3 crusades to Finland. In 1187 or slightly earlier, in 1191 and in 1202. And Swedes, possibly the so-called Second Crusade to Finland, in 1249 against Tavastians, and the Third Crusade to Finland in 1293 against the Karelians. The so-called First Crusade to Finland, possibly in 1155, is most likely an unreal event. Also, it is possible that Germans made violent conversion of Finnish pagans in the 13th century. According to a papal letter from 1241, the King of Norway was also fighting against nearby pagans at that time. Okay, let's look then at the Swedish era. As a result of the Crusades, mostly the second one, and the colonization of some Finnish coastal areas with Christian Swedish population during the Middle Ages, including the old capital Turku, Finland gradually became part of the Kingdom of Sweden and the sphere of influence of the Catholic Church. Due to the Swedish conquest, the Finnish upper class lost its position and lands to the new Swedish and German nobility and the Catholic Church. In Sweden, even in the 17th and 18th centuries, it was clear that Finland was a conquered country and its inhabitants could be treated arbitrarily. Swedish kings visited Finland rarely, and in Swedish contemporary texts, Finns were portrayed to be primitive and their language inferior. Swedish became the dominant language of the nobility, administration and education. Finnish was chiefly a language for the peasantry, clergy, and local courts in predominantly Finnish-speaking areas. During the Protestant Reformation, the Finns gradually converted to Lutheranism, which is one of the largest branches of Protestantism. In the 16th century, a bishop and Lutheran reformer Mikael Agricola published the first written works of Finnish, of which the first work, ABC Kirja, was published in 1543, and Finland's current capital city Helsinki was founded by King Gustav Vasa in 1555. The first university in Finland, the Royal Academy of Turku, was established by Queen Christina of Sweden at the proposal of Count Per Brahe in 1640. The Finns reaped a reputation in the 30 Years' War as a well-trained cavalryman called Hakkapeliitta. That division excelled in sudden and savage attacks, raiding and reconnaissance, which King Gustavus Adolphus took advantage of in his significant battles, like in the Battle of Breitenfeld, 1631, and the Battle of Rhein, 1632. Finland suffered a severe famine in 1695 to 1697, during which about 1/3 of the Finnish population died, and a devastating plague a few years later. In the 18th century, wars between Sweden and Russia twice led to the occupation of Finland by Russian forces. Times known to the Finns as the Greater Wrath, 1714 to 1721, and the Lesser Wrath, 1742 to 1743. It is estimated that almost an entire generation of young men was lost during the Great Wrath, due mainly to the destruction of homes and farms and the burning of Helsinki. By this time, Finland was the predominant term for the whole area, from the Gulf of Bothnia, the Russian border. 2 Russo-Swedish wars in 25 years served as reminders to the Finnish people of the precarious position between Sweden and Russia. An increasingly vocal elite in Finland soon determined that Finnish ties with Sweden were becoming too costly, and following the Russo-Swedish War, 1788 to 1790, the Finnish elite's desire to break with Sweden only heightened. Even before the war, there were conspiring politicians, among them Georg Magnus Springborten, who had supported Gustav III's coup in 1772. Springborten fell out with the king and resigned his commission in 1777. In the following decade, he tried to secure Russian support for an autonomous Finland, and later became an advisor to Catherine II. In the spirit of the notion of Adolf Ivar Arvidsson, we are not Swedes, we do not want to become Russians, let us, therefore, be Finns. A Finnish national identity started to become established. So now, notwithstanding the efforts of Finland's elite and nobility to break ties with Sweden, there was no genuine independence movement in Finland until the early 20th century. Rather, the Finnish peasantry was outraged by the actions of their elite and almost exclusively supported Gustav's actions against the conspirators. The Swedish era ended in the Finnish War in 1809. Okay, moving on to the Russian era. On the 29th of March 1809, having been taken over by the armies of Alexander I of Russia in the Finnish War, Finland became an autonomous Grand Duchy in the Russian Empire, with a recognition given at the Diet held in Porvoo. This situation lasted until the end of 1917. In 1812, Alexander I incorporated the Russian Vyborg province into the Grand Duchy of Finland. Grand Duchy of Finland. In 1854, Finland became involved in Russia's involvement in the Crimean War, when the British and French navies bombed the Finnish coast and Åland during the so-called Åland War. During the Russian era, the Finnish language began to gain recognition. From the 1860s onwards, a strong Finnish nationalist movement known as the Fennoman movement grew, and one of its most prominent leading figures of the movement was the philosopher J.V. Snellman, who was strictly inclined to Hegel's idealism, and who pushed for the stabilization of the status of the Finnish language and its own currency, the Finnish markka, in the Grand Duchy of Finland. Milestones included the publication of what would become Finland's national epic, the Kalevala, in 1835, and the Finnish languages achieving equal legal status with Swedish in 1892. The Finnish famine of 1866 to 68 occurred after a promisingly warm midsummer, and freezing temperatures in early September ravaged crops, and it killed approximately 15% of the population, making it one of the worst famines in European history. The famine led the Russian Empire to ease financial regulations, and investment rose in the following decades. Economic and political development was rapid. The gross domestic product, or GDP, per capita was still half of that of the United States and a third of that of Britain. From 1869 until 1917, the Russian Empire pursued a policy known as the Russification of Finland. This policy was interrupted between 1905 and 1908. In 1906, universal suffrage was adopted in the Grand Duchy of Finland. However, the relationship between the Grand Duchy and the Russian Empire soured when the Russian government made moves to restrict Finnish autonomy. For example, universal suffrage was in practice virtually meaningless, since the Tsar did not have to approve any of the laws adopted by the Finnish parliament. The desire for independence gained ground. First, among radical liberals and socialists, driven in part by a declaration of the February Manifesto by the last Tsar of the Russian Empire, Nicholas II, on the 15th of February 1899. After the 1917 February Revolution, the position of Finland as part of the Russian Empire was questioned, mainly by Social Democrats. Since the head of state was the Tsar of Russia, it was not clear who the chief executive of Finland was after the revolution. The parliament, controlled by Social Democrats, passed the so-called Power Act to give the highest authority to the parliament. This was rejected by the Russian Provisional Government, which decided to dissolve the parliament. New elections were conducted, in which right-wing parties won with a slim majority. Some Social Democrats refused to accept the result and still claimed that the dissolution of the parliament, and thus the ensuing elections, were extra-legal. The two nearly equal powerful political blocs, the right-wing parties and the Social Democratic Party, were highly antagonized. The October Revolution in Russia changed the geopolitical situation once more. Suddenly, the right-wing parties in Finland started to reconsider their decision to block the transfer of the highest executive power from the Russian government to Finland, as the Bolsheviks took power in Russia. Rather than acknowledge the authority of the Power Act a few months earlier, the right-wing government led by Prime Minister P.E. Svinhufvud presented Declaration of Independence on the 4th of December 1917, which was officially approved 2 days later, on the 6th of December, by the Finnish Parliament. The Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, led by Vladimir Lenin, recognized independence on the 4th of January 1918. On the 27th of January 1918, the official opening shots of the Civil War were fired in two simultaneous events. On the one hand, the government beginning to disarm the Russian forces in Pohjanmaa, and on the other a coup launched by the Social Democratic Party. The latter gained control of southern Finland and Helsinki, but the white government continued in exile from Vasa. This sparked the brief but bitter civil war. The whites, who were supported by the Imperial Germany, prevailed over the Reds, which were guided by Kullervomaner's desire to make the newly independent country a Finnish Socialist Workers' Republic, also known as Red Finland, and part of the RSFSR. Russia. After the war, tens of thousands of Reds were and suspected sympathizers were interned in camps, where thousands were executed or died from malnutrition and disease. Deep social and political enmity was sown between the Reds and Whites that would last until the Winter War and beyond. Even nowadays, civil war remains a sensitive topic. The Civil War and the 1918-1920 activist expeditions called kinship wars into Soviet Russia strained Eastern relations. At that time, the idea of a Greater Finland also emerged for the first time. After brief experimentation with monarchy, when an attempt to make Prince Frederick Charles of Hesse King of Finland was unsuccessful, Finland became a presidential republic, with K.J. Ståhlberg elected as its first president in 1919. As a liberal nationalist with a legal background, Ståhlberg anchored the state in liberal democracy, supported the rule of law, and embarked on internal reforms. Finland was also one of the first European countries to strongly aim for equality of women, with Milna Sillanpää serving in Väinö Tanä's cabinet, as the first female minister in Finnish history in 1926 to 27. The Finnish-Russian border was defined in 1920 by the Treaty of Tartu, largely following the historic border but granting Pechenga, Petsamo, and its parent sea harbour to Finland. Finnish democracy did not experience any Soviet coup attempts, and likewise survived the anti-communist Lapua movement. Nevertheless, the relationship between Finland and the Soviet Union remained tense. Army officers were trained in France, and relations with Western Europe and Sweden were strengthened. In 1917, the population was 3 million. Credit-based land reform was enacted after the Civil War, increasing the proportion of the capital-owing population. About 70% of workers were occupied in agriculture and 10% in industry. The largest export markets were the United Kingdom and Germany. Okay, the last part of our story comes after World War II. The Soviet Union launched the Winter War on the 30th of November 1939 in an effort to annex Finland. The Finnish Democratic Republic was established by Joseph Stalin at the beginning of the war to govern Finland after Soviet conquest. The Red Army was defeated in numerous battles, notably at the Battle of Suomussalmi, after 2 months of negligible progress on the battlefield, as well as severe losses of men and material. The Soviets put an end to the Finnish Democratic Republic in late January 1940 and recognized the legal Finnish government as the legitimate government of Finland. Soviet forces began to make progress in February and reach Vyborg in March. The fighting came to an end on the 30th of March 1940 with the signing of the Moscow Peace Treaty. Finland had successfully defended its independence, but ceded 9% of its territory to the Soviet Union. The treaties signed with the Soviet Union in 1947 and 1948 included Finnish obligations, restraints and reparations, as well as further Finnish territorial concessions, in addition to those in the Moscow Peace Treaty. As a result of the two wars, Finland ceded Petsamo, along with parts of Finnish Karelia and Salla. This amounted to 12% of Finland's land area, 20% of its industrial capacity, its second largest city Vyborg, Viipuri, and the ice-free port of Liinahammari. Almost the whole Finnish population, some 400,000 people, fled these areas. The former Finnish territory now constitutes part of Russia's Finnish Republic of Karelia, Leningrad Oblast and Murmansk Oblast. Finland lost 97,000 soldiers and was forced to pay war reparations of 300 million. In 2020 this would be 5.5 billion. Nevertheless, it avoided occupation by Soviet forces and managed to retain its independence. I've really enjoyed understanding a bit better that part of history that I was unsure of. If you have any suggestions for moments in history that you think I should look at, particularly with a geographical understanding like this, then drop me a comment. Otherwise, take care and I'll see you soon.